So I asked myself again, what is it that I have to say to the world? What is it that I really have to leave behind if I were going to be dead in a week, and I had this one opportunity to say to the world what I feel really needs to be said? What does really need to be said? What do audiences around the world need to stop and consider, stop and listen to, and genuinely listen? What does humanity need to genuinely listen to? What words of wisdom or significance do we all really need to listen to? And that's, even though that's trying to say, okay, well, you distill, here's your moment, now here's 10 minutes to try to distill your whole life down into 10 minutes of words. But I'm doing that all the time anyhow. Anytime I start recording something, my basic motivation is I'm sifting through this great big button box of my mind and trying to come up with little bits of whatever I think the world needs to hear. And of course I turn on the record whenever the notion hits me, because the way it is, like a button box. I don't know if you've ever seen a button box. When I was a kid, my mother had this tin, like a cookie tin, that was full of all these individual buttons that she had for sewing. Anytime something would fall off a shirt or a jacket or a coat, it'd go into the button box, and there must have been thousands of all different kinds of buttons in that box, and it was a lot of fun to play with as a kid. Some of them were very creative, pretty little buttons of various sorts. And the amazing thing is, there it is. Here's your little tin that's the size of a salad bowl, and it's right in your hands, but there's thousands of buttons in there. And you might be holding a button in your hand at one moment. If you drop it back into that tin and then shake it up, it could take you months of sorting. At least, seriously, it could take you weeks to try to find that button again, even though it's right there in your hands. And that's the way thoughts are. In fact, the button box was just about exactly the size of a human brain. And the human brain holds so many more thoughts than a button box can hold of buttons. Thoughts take up no space at all, really. So there are billions of thoughts in your head, and they're right there in your brain. In your brain, which could fit in a salad bowl. They're right there in your head, right inside of your skull. But if you let it go, and if you don't record it while it's right in front of your eyes or in your hands, some things can take decades. In fact, I've recently had that happen. I mean, I've had it happen anyhow, but recently I've been particularly noticing certain thoughts or things, certain memories that are just certain things that I haven't thought about for decades. And at first I think, oh, wait a second, what was that about? Or certain objects that I haven't looked at for 20 to 30 years as I'm sorting through all this old stuff. And I pick up some of these old objects that I got 30 years ago, and I say, gee, why did I get this? Or what was this? Or where did this come from? And at first I'm like, I kind of, somewhere in the back of my mind. But I can't access it at the moment. But a number of these thoughts over the course of a few weeks, every once in a while, if I stop trying when I try consciously to think of what was that thing, I usually end up drawing a blank. But when I'm not thinking about it and I'm just doing stuff and I'm I'm picking up and finding other things, I find some object and it reminds me of, oh yes, that's where that thing came from. That's what that thing was, why I forgot. It's been 26, 27, 30 years since I got that thing, and I just didn't have it in my immediate conscious memory of exactly where I got that or what it was for. But then it comes back when I see something else that was related to that object, and I say, oh yes, of course, that's why I got that thing. I remember it was supposed to support the other thing that I have. It was supposed to go with the other thing, or I got it to fix that other thing, and that's what this came from. And it's a little bit unfortunate when this memory comes up after I've been unable to remember what the thing was and tossed it in the trash because what do I need this for? And then a couple of weeks later is, oh yes, that's what that was for, and I threw it out now and it's gone. So that's another sort of, people criticize pack rats and for never throwing anything out, but that's part of the reason, because you know that there was a use for the thing. Anyhow, remembering thoughts is like that button box. So that whole button box idea is why when you have a thought, very often you just have to say, I better record it now, because if I don't record it right now while it's fresh in my mind, I know it's going to be in my skull, but I might never be able to pick it out again from all the other billions of thoughts in my skull. It's all right there, right between my ears, but chances are I'll never find it again, or it might be decades or years before I ever reach that thought again. And by that time, who knows, my memory might start becoming rusty, so that it's actually, you lose access to that stuff. So that's a reason for hitting the record button. Once you've done that, the question is whether you're going to make the recording public or unlisted. That's another story. Whether these random thoughts that you come up with are worth making public for other people to hear, or whether you're just wasting other people's time, that's another consideration. But if you don't make it public, if you're worried about wasting other people's time, then even if there's just one person, in that way all you've done is you've jotted it down like a notepad for yourself for future reference if you make it unpublic. But as far as being of any immediate benefit to anybody else, it's as if you never recorded it at all. So sometimes, at the risk of seeming to flood the internet with useless ramblings, that's it. So at a certain point you say, well, I can't make this decision, even if only a few words that I said in this 10-minute rambling might be of some interest to somebody somewhere. If I don't make it public, whoever that person is, wherever they are, will never have the chance to find out whether there was anything worthwhile. So at the risk of being accused of basically littering with too much ramble, okay, I'll accept that guilt. I'll accept that accusation that I've been rambling too much, talking too much. I can live with that accusation. I've lived with it ever since I first learned to talk, which they said I was very late. Of course, I don't remember, but my parents said that I was not like an early talker. I was not a child who started talking at 6 months or 1 year or even a year and a half or even 2 years. I was very late in beginning to talk, as far as what was conveyed to me that I remember by my parents. They said, I started talking much later than normal. But what they said was he didn't start talking like most babies, saying da da doo doo ba ba bi bi. Didn't talk for the longest time, but when he started talking, this is what they said to me, when you started talking in complete paragraphs. You didn't start in single words or even single sentences. It was complete paragraphs. And I'm kind of a little bit proud of that, because it's the sort of thing that you hear about when people describe different types of brain styles. And it seems to me that probably when I was a young baby and people were probably thinking, well, what's wrong with him? He seems a bit slow. He's, 2.5 years old and he's still not even talking. Maybe he's retarded or hard of hearing or something. But then when I started talking, allegedly, it wasn't in words, it wasn't in sentences, it was in paragraphs. So it was like the image I have from that hearsay story about myself is that as a baby I must have been a quiet baby who was sitting there absorbing and didn't start feeding back until I had absorbed enough to be able to form sentences, complete sentences, and to feel that I had something to say as an infant. There's a certain kind of this deceptive type of intelligence, such as Albert Einstein being designated as possibly semi-retarded as a child for whatever reasons of that sort of situation. I mean, it's not a absolutely unique situation, but it is a rare more rare than the ordinary citizen. There's a slightly rarer type of child who sits and absorbs quietly and observes and listens, and seems to a lot of people to be maybe possibly backward, because they're not goo-goo gagaing and burbling around as we expect babies to do. But then when they finally get ready to open their mouth, then it's just sort of like the same reaction with Susan Boyle or Paul Potts. Somebody comes in and they look like unimpressive, but then they open their mouth and it's like, oh, wow, that's impressive. We didn't expect that from you. I'm going to stop this again because I'm afraid this is going to, it's gone long enough, and I'm constantly afraid it's going to do this thing where it says disconnected and then lose the recording.